Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second session of our Global Leaders webinar series. My name is Erasmo Sanchez Herrera, Director of the Global Division at NGLCC, and my pronouns are he, him, his. We are so excited for today's session, which will provide you with an insightful information on the topic of embracing healthy debates when interacting with different stakeholders across sectors. I would now like to introduce you to NGLCC Senior Vice President, Sabrina Gilkent. Sabrina?
Thanks, Erasmo, and good morning, everyone. Buenos días, bienvenidos. We're very excited for another great program today with Carrie Balliet. If you have not already done so, we ask you to rename yourself here on Zoom to add in your pronouns or pronombres next to your name, so we're properly addressing everyone to make this an inclusive environment. If you were with us for the last session with Carrie, I know you're just as excited as I am for today's program. I know that last time I learned so many insightful takeaways that we've been able to implement in our leadership styles here at NGLCC, and I hope that you'll find them to be as much of a benefit, if not more, to you in your work as global chamber leaders. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the wonderful Carrie Balliet. Take it away.
Thank you so very much, Sabrina and Erasmo, for the awesome introduction. I am super excited to be back with everyone today. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am Carrie Balliet. I am a transformational coach and the CEO and founder of Red Baron Coaching. And I am really proud to be a certified LGBTBE, as we say here in Wisconsin. I'm coming to you from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where spring is in full bloom here today. And my allergies are driving me a little crazy. So if you see me wipe my nose today with a tissue, it's because spring has sprung here in Milwaukee. Okay, so before we get started on today's workshop, which is Embracing Healthy Debate, which really is going to be a discussion for us today about conflict, okay? Because you can't have healthy debate without conflict. And we as humans feel conflicted a lot. So we are really going to dive into the subject of conflict today. So let's see, just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We've got our translators today. So if you have questions, if you have comments, please use the chat box. I want this webinar to be as interactive as it can be. And I encourage you to use the chat box. I will actually be asking some questions of you to actually put some answers in the chat box. We did this a little bit last time, so I'm going to encourage you to use the chat box today. I apologize, I'm having some work done on my house. I hope the noise is not too distracting, and hopefully it'll calm down in just a moment. Now, before I start sharing my screen today and we start diving in, I thought that it might be a good opportunity for us to just settle in, get our energy settled into the room. I always like to do this, you know, before we get started, especially with today's topic, because today's topic is conflict, and conflict can be a little uncomfortable for us as humans. And so today, before we get started, I wanted to do a little bit of a breathing exercise and do a safe space visualization with all of you. So I'd like you to join me, if you can, and you are in a safe space, to close your eyes and just settle into the space that you're in, and feel your seat connecting with your chair. And if you're able, put your feet firmly on the ground. And as we get settled into the room and we open ourselves up to the present moment and to the abundance that we have all around us, we are going to start our visualization by taking 2 collective breaths together. And this will be the same as the same breathing exercise we did in last workshop. So we'll breathe in for 5, We will hold for 5 and we will breathe out for 5. We will do that 2 times and I will count that out for you. And then after that, keep your eyes closed, settle in, and I will walk us through a safe space visualization and let you know when you can open your eyes. Okay, so we're going to start with those collective breaths. So we're going to breathe in through your nose and then out through your mouth. Okay, so in for 2, 3, 4, 5, hold 2, 3, 4, 5, breathe out 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in for 2, 3, 4, 5. Out or hold 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out for 2, 3, 4, 5. Bring your attention fully to this moment, to this experience, to the sound of my voice. Our intention together today is to co-create a safe space for our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. This is a safe space for us to explore and discover and to embrace the uncomfortable. It is a space of judgment-free awareness and presence. It is also a safe space for trust and truthfulness, a space for us to relate, recognize, and gain awareness. Our intention together today is to co-create a safe space to explore a conversation that embraces fear, challenges, as well as the difficulties that come with them, and hold space for our dreams and the goodness of all things. This is a safe and protected space to feel things you haven't felt before, to think things you haven't thought before. Today, we activate courage, truthfulness, and authenticity. We step into the power of our own experiences, and hold space for one another. We will create new understandings about the challenges of life and create new ways of being, shifting to a more authentic version of ourselves. We embrace the joys and challenges and the experience of being human. And let's take one final big belly breath in and release that through your mouth. Okay, open your eyes. We are ready to get started. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, thank you for that, Lauren. I appreciate that. Okay, my screen is up. Can everybody see that? Yes? Okay, perfect. All right, so embracing healthy debate. As we said, this is really talking about conflict and the concept of conflict and how conflict shows up for us as a human being. So today we're going to talk a little bit about healthy debate, right, and what that looks like. And we're also really going to dive into conflict and why it's so hard for us to embrace conflict as a human. Some of the reasons behind why conflict is so hard for us as humans, really getting underneath the covers. We're going to talk about some of the behaviors and the thoughts that happen to us that come up during conflict. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some transformational shifts, right? So we're going to do a lot of exploration and a lot of uncovering today. And then we want to be able to take everything that we've learned and put it into action, right? How the heck do I do this, right? Now that I understand where my conflict is coming from and how it shows up for me, now how can I put that into practice, right? And that's all about shifting, okay? So again, as we are going along, please, 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 I encourage you to use the chat box to share your comments and your questions. Okay, so first slide is, what is healthy debate? So I really would like to get a conversation going via the chat box about what we all think healthy debate looks like. So for you, What does healthy debate mean, and what does it look like? So share your thoughts and ideas with me, please. Lauren says open and clear communication. Yes, I love it. Thank you. Yes. Who else? Maxine says not attacking the person. Only discussing the problem. Yes. Sabrina, sharing varying ideas and viewpoints without judgment and with the intention of learning from one another. That's so beautiful. Greg, agree to disagree. Alicia, agree to disagree. TJ, disagreement where the opinion is not agreed but respected. Jada, actively listening and communicating. These are all very, very spot on. That is correct. All of these are correct. So healthy debate is listening to one another's ideas. Healthy debate is considering everyone's point of view. Healthy debate is having a passionate conversation, right, around the important issues that are relevant to your chamber. Healthy debate is being able to explore, right, and find the best solutions, the best opportunities, the best possibilities for your chambers, right? Healthy debate is vulnerable, right? Got to be vulnerable to have healthy debate. Healthy debate can be triggering for us as humans. Healthy debate can be uncomfortable, and it can be complex because it involves differences of opinions that involves strong emotions. And that is the thing about healthy debate that makes it so difficult at times, right? Healthy debate is a beautiful thing, right? You get the best result for your chamber when you have healthy debate. However, we're talking about it today because strong emotions lead to conflict, and we as humans feel conflicted a lot. So today we're going to break it down a little bit and understand where that conflict comes from and why it's so important for us to have it. Okay. All right. So we're going to start out today actually by looking at where conflict falls in a triangle. Now, I use this triangle from Patrick Lencioni. Patrick is a leadership teacher, speaker, coach. He's written several books, and he likes to look at leadership and where conflict falls in terms of a triangle. So if you look at this triangle, you're going to see that conflict falls is the second one on the triangle, okay? And below conflict is trust, all right? And I like to replace the word conflict with healthy debate because I really think that conflict can be such a, what do I want to say? It can be such a jarring word, right? Where healthy debate seems a little bit more embraceable. And without healthy debate or conflict, getting commitment from everyone on your team to move in the same direction is going to be really tough, right? Holding people accountable and making sure that everyone is doing what needs to be done to be able to bring the project to fruition is also going to be really difficult to do. And ultimately achieving the results that you are looking for from the point of view of your chamber, right? Not your individual results, but your chamber's results, what you are looking to do as a chamber, the collective results, right? So without healthy debate, which of course means we have to embrace conflict, all of those things are really difficult. So that's why talking about healthy debate and understanding it is so incredibly important. All right. So we're actually going to start at the bottom of the triangle today, and we are going to talk a little bit about trust, because trust is so incredibly important in order for you to have healthy debate and embrace conflict. One of the things I wanted to mention about Patrick Lencioni. Patrick actually has a great book, and Lauren, if you can put this information in the chat box for everyone, that would be great. Patrick Lencioni's book is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And he does a great job. It's a little fable. He does a really great job of walking through that pyramid. And so that you really can see firsthand how everything interplays with one another, okay? But we're not gonna go above conflict today, okay? That's a whole other workshop. Today, we are gonna focus on the conflict part, and we're gonna start with trust, okay? So why is it so hard? Because we wanna be able to trust people, right? If you are not feeling safe and secure in your work environment, it is going to be really difficult for you to open yourself up, get comfortable with conflict, and be able to put yourself out there so that you can have healthy debate, right? I think we talked about this a little bit in our last workshop is, right, how do we build trust? We build trust by embracing vulnerability. I'm not able to speak today. Vulnerability, right? And so we're going to start with vulnerability again. We're going to explore it a little bit more today because it is that important. So vulnerability-based trust is incredibly important in order for you to be able to embrace conflict and have healthy debate. So I love this saying. This comes directly from Brené Brown, right? Vulnerability is measured by showing up and being seen without being able to measure the outcome. And when I read this quote from Brené Brown, I thought, wow, I really sat with it for a moment and I thought, yeah, that is exactly what vulnerability is, right? Whew, that's really scary, right? Vulnerability is super scary and it's really hard. Now, when we think about vulnerability in terms of the human experience, and you being, and all of us being a human, right? We all have some level of vulnerability, right? We're all able to, in some form, put ourselves out there, right? When we do something wrong, we're able to say we are sorry and we're able to mean it, right? However, sometimes as we are putting ourselves out there, we are also judging ourselves for our actions and the way that we are showing up. And that can get in the way of us truly embracing vulnerability to the level that we want to be able to bring trust into our everyday life at work and at home, right? This isn't just about work. This also happens at home too, right? So the level of vulnerability that is required for us to create trust doesn't always come naturally to us. It is a learned skill. It has to be encouraged, it has to be practiced. And so understanding why it's so hard for us as humans to be vulnerable is really key in helping you be able to build that skill of vulnerability. So that's why we're talking about all of this again today. And that's why we're going to dive a little bit deeper today to understand so that you can build up your vulnerability skill. Okay, so I actually have 2 questions for you to start our session off today. So here's your first question for you to think about. I grew up believing that vulnerability was what? What did you grow up believing that vulnerability was? You think about it. So that's your first question. If you are feeling safe and secure, and I hope that you are, that we're able to hold a safe space. Anthony, weakness, meaning you are weak. Something to keep in check, weakness. This is awesome. I didn't even have to prompt you to share. Thank you. I love this. This means we've created a safe space where people feel safe enough to share. This is awesome. This is what we want. We want a community that feels safe. This is great. My answer to this was I grew up believing that vulnerability was for other people. I thought that was really interesting for myself. That was my answer when I answered this. Sabrina says ditto. Yes. Okay, now let's go to the second question. For me, vulnerability feels like. So take a moment, TJ. I love your answer. Yes, I get it. I can validate that that answer. So really just take a moment, right? And just feel into your body. When you think about vulnerability, what does it feel like for you? Sabrina, a daily practice to be mindful of. Yes, yes. When I think about vulnerability and what it feels like in my body, it feels, oh, Anthony says areas to improve. Yes. For me, it feels raw. Vulnerability feels really raw to me. It feels really, it feels very scary to me. And it feels a little foreign to me. Like, I'm like, Greg says human. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Alicia says transparent. Yeah, this is great. Yeah. So really just get in touch with these two questions as you're thinking about your vulnerability. And right, because it's important that we understand what we think and also what we feel, because thinking and feeling is tied together. We're going to get to that a little bit more today in the workshop, but this sort of gives us a nice, opens the door for us to do our exploration today. Okay, so vulnerability-based trust can only be achieved when you have the confidence that others' intentions are good and that there is no reason to be protective or careful around other people. Okay, that's the safety, right? Got to feel completely safe because you're going to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. All right, so this really is the foundation of our talk today around healthy debate and understanding conflict and the way that we as humans show up in conflict. Okay. Any questions before we dive in a little bit deeper today? All right. So let's talk a little bit about how trust is earned and how we as humans earn trust, because trust is actually earned in very small moments. So think about the people in your life that you trust. Why do you trust them? Why do you trust the people in your life? So if you can put your answers and share in the chat box, that would be great. Love to know what you're thinking about trust. Why do you trust the people in your life? Sabrina says accountable, open. Mhm. Anyone else? TJ says never judgmental. Yeah. Reliable. Maxine says reliable. I love that. Yeah. Yeah, so really, when you think about it, Sabrina says, knowing they have my best interest in mind, just not their own. Yes. Oh, this is so beautiful. Yeah, right. So the people that you trust, you trust them because they pay attention, right? They pay attention to you. They remember what kind of coffee you like to drink. They probably remember a lot of personal details about your life. And they remember that when you said that you didn't like mushrooms, so when they order pizza because you're, working on a big project, they remember, oh, Sabrina doesn't like mushrooms. I'm going to not order a mushroom pizza because I know she doesn't like it, right? Right. So the second thing is listening. Yeah. I don't know how I knew that, Sabrina, but I did. The second thing is listening to understand, right? They listen to understand you. They're not thinking about what their responses are going to be. They're not thinking about themselves. They're thinking about you. And we talked about a little bit about this in the last workshop that we did about listening to understand instead of listening to respond, right? They are listening to what you have to say because it's important to them, because you are important to them. And lastly, they care about you, right? They are genuinely concerned about your well-being. So you have a connection to them that is not just on the surface. They genuinely want you to be happy, safe, and they love you. So there's that L word again, right? The big love word again comes into vulnerability-based trust and comes into trust, right? So why is vulnerability-based trust so hard? Because you are a human and you are hardwired for survival and belonging. Those are your first two, right? So we've got three. We've got survival, belonging, becoming. Survival and belonging are the first two. Your body and brain will do absolutely anything to keep you safe, right? So your survival intentions are that strong. And when your survival and belonging intentions get kicked up, which is what happens to us when conflict arises, right? Our primitive brain takes over. And so understanding all of this is so important to embracing conflict. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to understand all of the things that makes it difficult for us to embrace conflict because things get kicked up for us, right? And think about conflict as the threat, right? When conflict arises for you, it's a threat, and so your body's trying to keep you safe. Okay. All right. So we're gonna, along with vulnerability-based trust, right? Because we know that that is our foundation, right? That's the foundation to everything, right? We need to have vulnerability-based trust in order for us to have healthy debate. And we know that conflict is part of that. And so we're also going to talk about some of the other factors that come in as we approach conflict. So we're going to spend a little time talking about our personalities, because that really plays a really big part in how we show up during conflict. Our culture, whether it, and our family and generational really play a big part in how we show up in conflict. And our experiences, the experiences that we have in life also plays a really big part. So we're going to walk through these three areas first today during our workshop so that we can learn a little bit more about these three things. Okay. So we're actually going to start with personalities first. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this today because this one's really important, right? Everyone has a style. Everyone has a personality style. And getting to know your style better is really important in starting to understand you and how you show up in the world, right? Not just in conflict, but how you really show up in the world, right? And a lot of that has to do with your style. And once you understand your style a little bit better, then you can start to get curious and understand other people's styles. And so I love having discussions around personalities, and I actually use assessments to be able to help people understand their styles. And we don't have time to go into an assessment today for our workshop, but we do have a time to do a little bit of an exercise that will help you figure out kind of what your style is. And I actually use an assessment that is done by Wiley and Sons, John Wiley and Sons. They are the publishing company that is located in Minneapolis. And I use their Everything Disc profile to help people figure out their personality styles. Now, I like to use the Everything Disc because it's simple. So there are 4 styles that Wiley has identified, and 4 categories. And so I like the 4 categories because, again, it's simple. I like it because it allows you to all speak the same language as you're thinking about your styles, right? It just gives you some greater understanding. Okay, so we're actually going to do a little bit of an exercise so that you can quickly figure out what your style is. And then you can also use this to help you figure out other people's styles within your chambers and even in your cross sector, right? All the cross-sector partners and sponsors that you're working with, okay? It's really helpful, all right? So we're gonna get started with, I've got 2 questions for you, okay? So here are your first 2 questions in figuring out your style. First question is, are you, so when you think about yourself and how you show up in the world, do you move quickly? Are you very active in what you're doing? Are you very fast-paced? Do you like to move quickly? Are you assertive? Are you not afraid to speak your mind? Do you offer your opinions freely? Do you consider yourself dynamic? And do you consider yourself to be bold in your actions, bold in your opinions? You are a risk taker. That doesn't bother you. Okay. So if that is you, you are going to choose A. Or are you, and do you find yourself being a little bit more thoughtful, right? You like to take it a little slower, right? You like to think things through. A little bit calmer, a little bit more reserved. You're a little bit more methodical, right? You want to make sure that you are coming at things from a very methodical way, right? You're moderate paced in your actions. Can you find yourself in the middle of the 2? You can. Pick the one that resonates the best with you, okay? All right, so really awesome question, Sabrina. Thank you for asking that. Yes, pick the one that resonates the best with you, okay? All right, so you're either going to pick A or B, okay? A or B. All right, now we're gonna move on to the next set of questions, okay? So when you think about yourself, do you find yourself to be focused on people? You're thinking about people's emotions and feelings and what they're thinking, right? You are very accepting of people's thoughts and ideas, right? You just kind of roll with the punches. You roll with the flow, right? You're very empathetic. You put yourself in other people's shoes often. You think about their feelings, right? You are receptive, right? Going into a room full of people is energizing for you. You are agreeable. You will, when somebody has an idea, you're immediately like, that's an awesome idea. Let's just go with it, okay? Or do you find yourself being a little bit more questioning, right? When somebody puts out an idea, do you say to yourself, that's a really great idea, but I have a couple of questions, right? Or, I don't really, feelings aren't part of what I do. I really am very logic focused, right? I'm very logical and analytical, right? I'm objective. I'm a little bit skeptical, okay? All right, so you're gonna pick C or D, okay? All right, now we get to put the 2 together, okay? And that is going to determine your style. And we're gonna see how this resonates with you, because this, again, this is just really, really quick. There's a lot more to this if you take the assessment, but we're gonna roll with it and do a little people reading today, okay? All right, so if you chose A and D, okay? The picture over on the right you see is a circle, right? And you see that there are 4 quadrants in the circle, right? So this is the model that I was talking about, the everything disc personality model, okay? There are 4 quadrants in the model. In the top left is the D quadrant, or the dominant quadrant, okay? So if you chose answers A and D, you most likely fall in the dominant quadrant, which is the active and questioning quadrant. You move quickly, you like to move quickly, but you're also questioning and challenging, okay? If you found yourself answering A and C, you are in the upper right quadrant of the model, which is the influencer. Okay, so you like to move quickly, but you are not questioning. You're very accepting. You roll with the punches. Well, it'll all come out in the wash. We'll figure it all out. It's all good, right? If you found yourself answering B and D, you fall in the lower left quadrant of the model, which is the conscientious quadrant. And the conscientious style is thoughtful and questioning, right? So this means you probably move a little bit slower, right? A little bit more thoughtful, and you're probably questioning. You probably question a lot, have a lot of questions. Want to make sure that you're being very thorough. And if you chose B and C, you are in the lower right quadrant, which is the S quadrant, and you identify with the steadiness style. And the steadiness style is accepting, right? So you're very people focused, you're very in tune with people's feelings and emotions, but you're very thoughtful about it. And so you probably don't move quickly. You're probably a little bit more reserved. You may not speak out in meetings. You may need to think through and process things. Okay? So I'm wondering, are there any questions as you are thinking about this and answering these questions for yourself and trying to figure out where you fall on the quadrant and what style you are? Looking at the chat box, just want to make sure that we're all good before we move on and dive a little bit deeper into what these styles mean for you, especially as you show up in conflict. Okay, awesome. All right. So let's take a look at the priorities, okay? Because if you see the circle, right, you see that there are words around the circle. And these are what we call your priorities. And your priorities are really just where you spend your energy, okay? So if you are in the dominant quadrant, if you identify with the dominant style, you are going to focus your energy on challenge, result, and action. Now, what does that mean, right? Well, that means that you are probably going to challenge people's thoughts and ideas, right, as they bring them up. It means that you are going to be very result oriented, right? You're going to go right to the results. You're not going to worry so much about the process. You're going to go right to the results. And the dominant style likes to take action really. They like to move quick. So the dominant styles will take action very quickly. Now let's move over to the three words that are associated with the I style, the influencer style. The three words are action, enthusiasm, and collaboration. So what does this mean from an influencer, right? Influencer styles also like to take action, right? They're very focused on the big picture, not worried about the details. They come at things with great enthusiasm, and they love, the I style loves to collaborate. So they want to work with a group of people. That's very energizing to the influencer style. The conscientious style, where if you identify with that style, you will most likely spend your energy on prioritizing challenge, accuracy, and stability. So that means that you will ask a lot of questions, right? You will challenge. You will want to know the information behind what somebody is saying. It will be important for you to know that, right? Accuracy will also be important. The C style tends not to share things until they know what they are sharing is correct. And the conscientious style likes stability, right? So they will move, that style will move at a much slower pace than the D or the I styles. And the priorities for the steadiness style are collaboration, support, and stability. So if you are in the steadiness quadrant, right, you will spend your energy again on collaborating, right? You will want to make sure that everyone has what they need to be able to get the job done. This style is incredibly supportive. This style most likely will take on work even when they have more work than they can handle. And this style likes stability. So change is a little unnerving for this style, right? This style likes harmony, okay? So that just gives you a little bit more insight into the different styles and where you prioritize your energy depending on what style you are, all right? The next thing we're going to look at as far as styles is just really looking at what does it mean if I'm in the D quadrant, right? What does it mean? Well, if you identify with the dominant style, you are probably pretty direct in your communication. You are results oriented. You tend to be very firm in the way that you make your decisions and the way that you tend to move forward. Dominant styles are very strong-willed and they actually can come across as forceful at times. Now, if we go over to the influencer side of the circle, we see the influencer style is very outgoing, very enthusiastic. Influencer styles are very optimistic. The glass is usually half full with influencers. The influencer style is very high-spirited and very lively. Influencers like to talk. There's always a party when the influencers are in the room. Let's move down to the conscientious style, okay? So if you are in the conscientious quadrant, you will notice that conscientious styles are very analytical, right? It's all about the data and the facts, very analytical, reserved, kind of quiet, right? Thoughtful, precise, want to make sure that all of the information is correct. Conscientious styles can be very private, and the conscientious style works in a very, very systematic way. And then if we move down and over to the right and go over to the steadiness style, if you identify with this style, you may find yourself being even-tempered. The steadiness style is very accommodating, right? That's when we talked about the taking on the work, even though you got a lot of work. The steadiness style is accommodating. You will find patience in the steadiness style, very humble and very tactful. The steadiness style is very focused on the feelings of people. So steadiness styles tend to be very tactful. All right. Now what we're going to do is, now that we got a little bit more information about the personality styles and you're kind of figuring out where you fit on this diagram, all right, we're going to move into conflict. Okay, so if we come at this from the lens of conflict, how does your style show up in conflict and healthy debate? All right, so we actually have a second set of priorities because our styles change a little bit as we are thinking about conflict, okay? So if you identify with the dominant style, okay, you are going to spend your energy. Remember, this is where you prioritize your energy. You are probably going to prioritize your energy on justification. So you are going to justify your decisions and your actions, right, by taking control of the conversation or the situation so that you can assert yourself and your thoughts, right? And you're probably not going to be worried about relationships, right? If you are an I on the right side, you will spend your energy on assertion, expression, and reassurance, right? So you will spend your energy asserting yourself and your opinions. You will not be afraid to express your thoughts and your feelings. You may actually even let your frustration show a little bit. However, the I style will also want the reassurance from everyone else that everything is okay, because conflict can be very unnerving for the influencer. Now, if you're down in C, okay, your three priorities in C are justification, objectivity, and stability. So the conscientious style will spend their energy questioning others' motives, being thorough. The C style will be analytical and logic focused, stick the facts. Conscientious styles will be more anxious about rocking the boat, suggesting changes, and displays of emotions for the conscientious style can be uncomfortable when you are in conflict. And if you go over to the steadiness side, right, your priorities in conflict in steadiness are reassurance, harmony, and stability, right? So if you identify with the S style in conflict, you are more likely to be less enthusiastic and expressive. You will find yourself being quiet because you need time to process. You will be concerned about hurting other people's feelings and what other people are feeling in the room during conflict. And you will probably listen instead of speak. And you will be thinking about people's emotional needs during conflict. So this just gives you a little bit of information about what your different personality styles are and how we show up in the world based on our personality styles. So questions about this before we move on to talk about the next thing that we want to talk about, what affects conflict, which is cultural considerations, cultural, familiar, and generational considerations. So, but I want to make sure, does anybody have questions about your personality style? Is this resonating with you? Are you saying to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm totally fit into the dominance quadrant? Oh my gosh, I am an influencer. I had no idea. Can your style change in different settings? This is such a great question, Alicia. Thank you for asking this. So, okay, Maxine, I'm going to get to you in a moment. All right. So, this is why your priorities are so important to know, right? Because we all have a core style, right? And we will adapt that style depending on the situation that we are in. And that's why you will see that the priorities, those words around your circle, are different from the words around your circle when you get into conflict. Those words also change when you go into a leadership mode. Those words also change when you go into a management mode. So leadership is the leading of many, right? You're leading many people. Management is that one-to-one leadership. Okay, so it's that one-on-one, right? So your base style will remain the same. However, you may adapt your style depending on the situation that you are in. So it gets really complex really fast. And this is why taking the assessment is a really awesome idea, because it gives you a ton more information, right? This is just to do some people reading so that you can sort of think, okay, this person is a dominant, right? This person is in the D quadrant. I'm in the S quadrant. What is that going to mean for me? That means that I am coming at this from a completely different lens than this person who's up here in the D. That means that I am probably going to need to stretch myself, right? I may need to move a little bit quicker than I'm comfortable with. I am going to probably not get everything answered. I'm probably going to not get all my needs met in one meeting. I'm going to have to come back to that person, right? Because they're going to move so quickly that they may not be able to answer all of my questions, right? And so Maxine said, I think I'm one personality style at work and a different one outside of work. Again, this is your adaptive styles, right? You are adapting to your style. Your core style is your core style. There are a lot of other factors that come into play in how you interact with the world. And we are going to get to those in a moment. Okay, so your personality style is only one part of how you interact with the world around you. And we're going to talk more about what the other ones are. So this is what I call the big giant bowl of spaghetti. Because we humans are complex, right? We're complex beings. It's not always simple, but these are great questions. And I encourage you to just explore and discover, okay? Do more exploration and do more discovery. Okay, any more questions before we move on? Okie dokie. Okay, all right. So let's talk a little bit about cultural considerations, familiar and generational, right? And we're looking at this through the lens of conflict, right? So when we think about language, right? Language barriers when conflict arises, right? When conflict arises, our primitive brain takes over, right? So speaking a second language will be much more stressful and frustrating for you, right? Meanings of words can be misinterpreted in language, right? Even sayings from different regions, right? We have a saying here in the Midwest. We call it, everyone always says to one another, it's a horse apiece, right? If I said that to a lot of people, they may think, what does that mean, right? So we have to think about language when we think about conflict. We also need to think about customs and traditions and communication during conflict, right? We all communicate differently. Some people like to communicate face to face. Some people like to communicate over the phone. Some people like to communicate over Zoom. Some people like to communicate over email. Asking people how they like to communicate is really important. You may think that person sent me an email. I would have never done that, right? But if you are an S and you are interacting with a dominant style, sending an email actually might be a really good thing. But if you are an S and you are sending an email to an I who is another people-focused person, that I may be saying, I wish that person would have come and talked to me, right? So asking about how you want to be communicated with is extremely important. And then thinking about customs and traditions, right? And familial and generational learnings, right? Think about cultural legacy. In some cultures, asking direct questions is not appropriate. Hierarchy may be a factor, right? So think about everyone's culture and generational and familial upbringings and ask questions, get curious. I worked with a team in India, a technology team, and I asked them a ton of questions about their culture and what was okay and what was not okay and what was considered rude and what was considered appropriate, because I wanted to make sure that I was being inclusive of them and that I was creating a safe space. Okay, so that's the cultural. And then the other thing that we're going to talk about a little bit is experiences, right? Because your experiences completely shape the way that you look at conflict, right? So think about your experiences of your family, right? Do you come from a large family? Do you have a lot of relatives? Is everyone talking over one another? Is there a lot of shouting going on because everybody needs to be heard, right? Do you have a lot of siblings? Are you the oldest in a long line of children? Are you the youngest in a long line of children? Or are you the only child? That's definitely going to affect the way that you show up in conflict. Even your health, right? Think about any health issues you may have. Think about health issues that have affected your family, right? Are there any health concerns that come into play for you? Because that's going to definitely affect how you show up in conflict. Trauma. Let's talk about trauma for a moment, because trauma is so important when we think about conflict, right? Some people have major traumas in their life, right? It happens to us humans. Bad things happen to good people a lot. So there can be major trauma in people's lives. There also can be what I like to call the micro traumas, right? These are the small things that happens to us, and we feel the trauma from them, right? And it can be as simple as in the 6th grade, you were walking to school and you always passed a child that wore a red backpack, and that person said mean things to you. And as an adult, every time you see a red backpack, that trauma is re-triggered by your body, because our bodies hold on to our emotions. So it's really important to think about traumas, because that will definitely affect even your education, right? What kind of an education did you receive? Do you have a high school diploma? Did you go to college? Did you receive an MBA? Did you receive a PhD? Do you I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. My father did not believe in formal education. I do not have a college degree, right? That definitely affects the way that I show up, especially in conflict. And then finally, adventure, right? How adventurous are you, right? This picture on the screen, do you identify with jumping out of a plane? Does that sound like fun to you? Or do you think that is so not fun? I would never do that. My idea of fun is going to the park and spending a day having a picnic with my family, right? So your adventures definitely come into play. So all of your experiences come into play as you think about conflict, okay? All right. Questions about personality, cultural considerations, and experiences. Questions and comments before we transition over into the experience of being human. We're going to dig in a little bit deeper now. Okay. Questions? Okay. My chat box is empty, so I'm going to take that as a sign that we can move on. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the experience of being human. I love this topic because this is the commonality that we all have together. This is every single one of us. And the experience of being human includes our beliefs and our judgments, and we all have them. And I'd like to talk about this experience from take two things into consideration. And this is the duality of the human experience. So this is looking at the fact that we have a part of us as a human that is externally focused and externally driven. And I call this your external self, right? This is part of you that is focused on the outside world. This is the part of you that is tied to your ego. This is tied to survival and belonging, okay? This is where the safety comes in, right? We're tied to the external part, okay? We also have a part of us that is internally focused. This is our internal self. This is the part of us that is tied to our becoming, right? This is the third thing in our intentions, the top 3 intentions as a human. On the inside of us is our becoming, and this is attached to our authenticity, our potential, our power. Our belief system also is tied to the internal. So our belief system is formed and is tied to our internal selves. So we're going to talk a little bit about the duality of being human and look at the external world, the external part of us, and how that interacts with the inside part of us, the internal part of us that holds our authenticity and our belief system. Okay, so that's where we're going to explore now. Okay, and we're actually going to start talking about our belief system and how our belief system is structured and how that comes into play for us as we are thinking about conflict. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at our belief system. All right, let's break it down. Okay, so how is our belief system formed for us as humans? Well, if we think about the external world, right, as a human, you're in the external world, you are taking in external data all the time, right? Every single day, You are responding to the data that is coming at you from me, right, in this workshop, from television, from people around you, from your family, from your network, everybody, right? Internal data is coming at you all the time. You are taking, as a human, you are taking that external data and you are internalizing it, right? That's coming into your internal self, right? Inside. Your emotions and your feelings live on the inside. And you are actually internalizing all of that data on the inside. And after you get done internalizing it, right, it creates your belief system. You create a belief system around it, and your belief system is your truth. Okay, so external data plus internalization equals your truth or your belief system, right? Questions about that? Because this one's really important to understand. This is a really big human component for us. Okay. All right, so let's take it even further. Okay, so let's just examine external data a little bit more and how we interface with the external world, how our external selves work. Okay, so as a human, you are rooted in the external world, right? You have a physical body, you interact with the external world, you have eyes that look outward, right? You take action in the world. It's important as a human that you take action. It is what makes you feel successful, right? It is the goals that we set and the actions that we take that are tied to our value and our worth, right? This is about our belonging. This ties into our belonging need, right? As a human, you probably have a to-do list, right? You have a to-do list. I know I have one. Most of us either write a to-do list down or we have a to-do list in our head, right? We do things. This is the external part of us. It's a very important part of being a human. Now, as humans, right, and we are interacting with our external world, right? Imagine that you carry around a backpack. So imagine that everywhere you go, since the day that you have been born, you carry around a backpack. And all of the events, experiences, and learnings that you have encountered throughout your entire life go into your backpack. It goes with you wherever you go, right? And so let's look at the things that you carry around, right, that make up your backpack. Because we talked about, I think, mostly all of these, right? So we talked about your personality and how that affects how you show up, especially in conflict. We talked about cultural, familial, and generational, right? We talked about those three. We talked about your experiences, right? We talked about your health. We talked about your education. And we talked about your adult and your childhood experiences, right? And so all of these experiences that you have that you carry around in your backpack, right? Traumas also come along for the ride. They come inside the backpack. Oh, Pretty says, is there an interpretation gap between the external data and our internalization? Oh, this is such a great question. And the answer is yes, Acrity. The answer to that is yes, there is. So let me finish up talking about the backpack, and then I'll get to that gap in just a second, okay? Because thank you for mentioning that. This is really important, all right? So everything you have in your backpack influences the way you interact with the world. What is in your backpack is unique to you. So what makes sense to you because of all of the things that you've experienced and learnings and events may not make sense to someone else. So as you are thinking about conflict and the way that you are showing up in conflict, right? What has happened to you in the external world and your events shapes the way you influence the world because you've internalized all of them. And this is where the gap comes in. So I'm so glad that you mentioned this, Acrity, because I call this the performance possibility gap, right? There is always a gap between what is manifesting in our external world and your belief system. And this is part of what transformation is all about. Transformation is learning into the gap. So it's understanding the gap that comes from what's happening in the external world and what your belief system is. And so this gets us into the next part of our discussion, which is about the internalization and your story, right? Because the events, experiences, and learning that are in your backpack get internalized by you, and it becomes part of your belief system and becomes part of your story. So I'm actually going to give you an example of this from my childhood, okay? Because I wanted to give you a real life example of what this looks like, okay? As a child, oh, by the way, I wanted to say, if you're people reading me, I am an I. I'm an influencer on the DISC quadrant, and I am complex because I actually shade over and I have an extra priority and I shade into results. So if that's very interesting about me, that makes me a little bit more complex than a straight up I. So I wanted to say that before I get into my story about my childhood, because I'm definitely, and my personality is an I, because I was very creative. I was very imaginative as a child. I had a ton of imaginary friends. I was constantly putting shows on in my backyard, performances. I was always pushing the boundaries of everything. I was always thinking outside the box. I drove my parents insane. And so my father was constantly asking me to stop being so curious. Stop asking so many questions, Carrie. Please just do what I tell you. Right? Or if I came up with some crazy idea on my own, like building a fort in the middle of the living room, he would say, Carrie, or my mother would say, Carrie, pick all of those things up. You've made the living room a mess. Pick it up, clean it up. So, right? So think about this is the experience that I had as a child, right? Don't do it this way, do it that way. I didn't tell you to do that. I told you to do this. Go do that, right? All of these experiences shaped who I am because I took those experiences that went into my backpack and I internalized it, right? And what did I learn? I learned that my imagination, my creativity, my thinking outside the box, my pushing the boundaries got me in trouble. And so over time, I learned to stop asking questions. I learned to stop pushing the boundaries. I learned to just do things the way that I thought my parents wanted them done. Even though when I tried to do that, I still did it wrong. And so my belief system was created. And it definitely has influenced the way that I have showed up, especially in conflict. And I'll get to that a little bit later, but I wanted to just share that story with you so that you could see an example of how our experiences in our lives and how our belief system get formed from the things that we do. Questions about that? Okay. So why is all of this so important? Why is knowing, right, the external world and the internal and our belief system and the external world, why is this so important? Well, it's because stuff happens to us all the time, right? We feel conflicted and uncomfortable a lot, and it's not just at work. We feel conflicted and uncomfortable every single day. And understanding it and knowing it and being able to see it then allows us to embrace it, honor it, and then shift the behavior, right? So let's just take some examples of some of the stuff that happens to us, right? Some of the things that happen to us in our life are small. Maybe you woke up late this morning and you set yourself up for a stressful day. Well, that doesn't feel very good, does it? Right? So, and you can feel it in your body, right? When you are in conflict and something happens, you can feel it, right? Think, oh, I probably shouldn't have stayed up so late last night. I probably shouldn't have hit the snooze button 3 or 4 times, right? Now I'm late and everything, my whole day is off, right? Or maybe somebody challenges you in a meeting, right? Challenges the idea that you have. And now all of a sudden, right? Ooh, you can feel that, right? You can feel it in your stomach. Maybe your chest gets a little tight and you're thinking, oh gosh, I didn't have enough information. I shouldn't have said something. I wasn't quite prepared. Oh, they probably think that I'm not very good at what I'm doing. Oh, maybe I just should have not said anything. Oh my gosh, I'm a little embarrassed. And maybe I'm even a little frustrated at the person who asked all those questions, right? I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't thinking about that, right? So those are the examples of the small stuff where we feel conflicted. And then, of course, there is really big stuff that happens in our life, right? Like when one of your strategic partners comes to you and says, can you pilot a new program for us? And you think, oh my gosh, that means we're going to have to totally pivot what we're doing, and I have no idea how to do that. Oh boy, that doesn't feel so good. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I got to bring this up to the board. I got to mobilize all of these volunteers. I have no idea what I'm doing. Oh, right? You feel the tension and the stress in that, right? It's conflict. Or let's just say that someone in your family is diagnosed with an illness, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to change everything, right? This is going to change how I am living. This is going to change how my family member is living. Oh my gosh, this is impacting all of us. I have no idea what the future is going to hold for us. Oh, this feels really crappy, right? We are, as humans, conflicted a lot. And understanding conflict is really understanding the feelings that go on in the body, right? This is getting connected to our internal selves because our bodies feel the conflict. Our heads think about the conflict, but our bodies feel it, right? And so what happens, right? Well, your strategic partner comes to you, right, and says, we want you to help us with this pilot project, right? Manifesting in the external world, right? You are going to internalize that, right? Tap into your belief system and you are feeling it in your body. And then all of a sudden your body goes, warning, warning, something's going on. I feel conflicted. Something's happening. I'm tapping into my belief system. I want to do something to fix it. And now your head kicks in. What can we do? Right? And remember, when we get into conflict, it's survival. So our primitive brain kicks in. And so going through of all of this and understanding this is understanding the feelings and the process that's going on so that you actually can take pause and stop and say, I know what's going on. I know what's happening. And I am going to respond to this in a different way. So this comes back to the doing part of the human experience, right? We are rooted in the external world. We want to do. We don't always think about our being, the internal part. And in order for us to be okay with conflict and embrace healthy debate, we want to try to flop the two. So we come from a place of being first and understanding what's going on, and then we can do with intention. Okay. And so exploring all of these areas and the way that conflict shows up for us allows you to be able to do that so that you can get out of primitive brain mode, shift into behavior that is more productive, that will allow you to ask curious questions, will be able to bring everybody in, create vulnerability-based trust. Okay, so I'm going to come back to my story and how it manifests itself, right? Because when I was in conflict, because of my belief system, my control was definitely kicked in, right? Very results oriented. I was not always listening to others' opinions. I was not always thinking outside the box, right? I was not showing up in that way because my body was very conflicted with what was going on. And it wasn't until I took a moment to think about how that my belief system was manifesting for me that I could actually shift that behavior. Okay, so questions about the importance of understanding the duality of being human and why this is all so important, because we're gonna move on now to truth and honesty about the human experience. Okay, so let's talk about embracing and honoring our truth, right? Which is basically your belief system, right? So we talked about truth as the castle principle last time we were together. We talked about how important it is to be truthful and what is truth, right? Your truth is your perception and observation of your experiences, right? So you've got the external world and how whatever it is happening is going on, right? Going into your backpack. It is going through your internal operating system, and your belief system is creating your truth, right? Because it is just your perception and observation of your experiences. That's your truth. Just it is what it is. Because everyone has a belief system. Every human does. No one is immune. Your honesty is your willingness to accept and express the truth. So if I take my example, my truth, I am results oriented. I know that from my personality assessment. I am also an influencer. That means that I am people focused, I am acceptable, I am agreeable, I am not a detail oriented person. I'm not. That's my truth. I also lean into control because I internalized what I learned and experienced in my life. It's just my truth. It's all it is. There's no judgment. There's no nothing. It is what it is for me. That's part of who I am as a human. And my honesty around this is this does not make me a bad person. It doesn't. I am not ashamed or embarrassed by any of this. It is just part of who I am. And this belief that I have created has kept me safe, and I am very grateful for it. It kept me safe because I didn't want to be in trouble when I was a kid all the time, right? So it definitely kept me safe then, right? And this belief has allowed me to do a lot of really great things in my life. I'm a great project manager. I'm really good at seeing the end result and being able to execute along the way. It's like a little superpower of mine. However, this belief has also held me back from being the vulnerable person that I want to be. And it's also held me back from being a better leader and a more caring and loving spouse and parent. That's the honesty around my truth. And so there are things here that I can do that I want to shift. So if you are embracing your truth and honesty, it's coming without judgment. It just is what it is. So let's talk about judgment for a little bit, because judgment's really hard as a human, right? We pass judgment on people and things every single day. Oh, Akriti said it, but it's very hard to be honest in that regard. Yes, it is, right? This is about building the skill, right? This is building the muscle, right? And it comes with awareness. It comes with practice, right? Just like trust, right? Shifts in behavior come in small increments, which is why building awareness, learning about all of this and understanding it is so important, so that over time you can shift. So let's talk about judgment, because it really is simply part of being a human. Every single person, every single one of us is in judgment, right? We pass judgment on ourselves and things. I am judging myself because I am embarrassed by what I said. I am judging the situation because I'm frustrated that we're moving so fast, or I'm judging the situation because I'm frustrated because we're not moving fast enough. I am judging the person because they are not sharing their opinions and I want to hear what they have to say. I'm judging the other person because they are constantly talking and they won't stop talking and I can't get a word in edgewise, right? So when we think about judgment, emotions drive behaviors. And when we judge our emotions, it is then the judgment that is driving the behavior. So this is why it's so important to understand our judgments. There is a great quote, and I included this in the reading list that Lauren shared. There's a great quote from, to find my book here, I have it. David Hawkins wrote a book called Power versus Force. It's in the chat in case you're interested in a good read. He says, all judgment reveals itself to be self-judgment in the end. And when this is understood, a larger comprehension takes place. The goal is to bear witness to your judgment and the judgment of others. So that's a really big statement, right? But basically what he is saying is that if you're able to sit with judgment and really look at it non-judgmentally, which is kind of funny, what you begin to realize is that all judgment comes from a place of self. So when I read this, I was really interested about that statement. So I've taken some time to think about it, and I'm really curious about that, about exploring that a little bit more and trying to understand exactly where my judgments come from, because I have them too. I do, especially when I'm in conflict. My judgments come up. Absolutely. So it's not right. It's not wrong. It's not good. It's not bad, right? This is all about taking out the binary and knowing that it just is. Judgment is just part of our life. Okay. So let's put this all together, right? Because this again is us learning and building the skill of vulnerability-based trust and understanding why it's so hard because of the conflict that we're in as humans, right? Vulnerability-based trust happens when people understand and admit the truth about themselves. And I hope today you understand a little bit more about all of the things that are going on in your world and how your personality and culture and experiences and your backpack and all that stuff is going into understanding your truth. And then when we understand the truth about ourselves and what's going on, right, we can choose not to engage in behaviors that make it difficult to achieve real results. So we're going to move into now taking a look at some behaviors, because I want to put this into real practice for you. I want everyone to be able to see, this is how this comes up during conflict, right? This is what this looks like. We want the real practice, and we've got a half an hour, so we've got time to dive in and take a look at some of the behaviors and the thoughts, okay? So we're going to start with the behaviors, and as we start with the behaviors, let's think about the feelings in the body, right? Because remember, we are a human being, so we are connected to our bodies, which is where our emotions live. And then we're also connected to our head, which is where our thoughts live, right? So it's the duality of that, right? Because our thoughts are connected to the external, our feelings connected to the internal, right? And we are the duality of being a human. Okay, so we're actually going to run through a couple of judgmental behaviors, things that happen to us when we get into conflict. So let's take a look at the first one, right? Because people who lack trust often exhibit the following behaviors when we are in conflict, right? We want to conceal our weaknesses and mistakes from one another, right? Oh, I do not want to let people know that I do not know how to do this. I do not want people to know that I don't know the answer to this. I'm not going to let people know that, right? That is a very, very vulnerable place to be, right? Second one, I am going to hesitate to ask for help. I don't want to ask anybody for help. I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to bother them, or, oh, I don't want them to think that I don't know the answer, or I don't know how to do this, or that I'm not strong enough to do this on my own, right? Or provide constructive feedback. Boy, I'd really like to give that person some feedback, but I'm so afraid that they're going to be mad at me. I don't really know how to say it in a positive way. So I'm just not going to say anything, right? Right? These are all very, very vulnerable places for us to be in conflict. Thinking about not offering to help people outside of their own areas of responsibility, right? This isn't my area. This isn't my area of responsibility. I don't want to get involved, right? I have enough on my plate. I'm not going to extend myself. I can't extend myself because I'm overwhelmed, right? This person doesn't help me. I'm not going to help them, right? So again, a very vulnerable place to be. And lastly, jumping to conclusions about the intentions of others without attempting to clarify, right? This happens a lot in meetings when we don't ask clarifying questions and we jump to our own conclusions based on the belief system that we have inside, right? This used to happen to me a lot in emails. Somebody would send an email out to a group of people. I wouldn't be on it. And I would jump to a conclusion that the person left me off because they didn't want me to be part of the project, when in reality, they just weren't thinking about it, right? But I jumped to that conclusion. So we jump to conclusions a lot, right? So those are the behaviors. So as you're thinking about the vulnerable place to be, right, this can bring up a lot of feelings in the body, right? Important to pay attention to your feelings in the body, to the emotions that are attached to these behaviors. Because again, if you are judging yourself, it will be hard for you to shift your behavior and come at it from healthy debate, right? Which is listening and what else did we say in the front, right? Listening to understand and getting other people's ideas and opinions, right? When you're coming from a place of judgment. So now we're going to move over and we're going to move into the automatic thoughts. Okay, so this is the head part, right? Because what happens, right? Something manifests in the external world, goes into our backpack, we internalize it, we feel it in the body, right? We feel it in the body, and then it kicks off the thought and we want to do something, okay? So to change our response in conflict and to have healthy debate, it's important to recognize the thoughts that make it hard for us to be productive, okay? So we're gonna run through some of the thoughts that happen when we are in conflict. All right. So I have a list of the 5 challenging personalities found at work during conflict. Okay. So you may say to yourself, I am not any of these, right? And the truth is, yes, you are not any of these. But when we go into conflict, we are tapping into our primitive brain. It takes over. And so sometimes we find ourselves tapping into these behaviors, even though we don't want to. Okay. So we're going to run through these and talk about them a little bit. So let's talk about the narcissistic tendencies, right? What does it mean when we say narcissistic tendencies, right? This is the need for attention. This is the lack of empathy and lack of concern for other people's feelings. This looks like when in conflict, interrupting people, interrupting the thoughts, and bringing the conversation back into your idea. And also looks like in conflict, not being able to think about the follow through, right? Because it's very, very in the moment focused on you, right? Passive aggressive type of behaviors in conflict. This looks like blaming others for things. It also looks like procrastinating, right? Dragging your feet. Right? Not sure I agree with all of this, so I'm going to drag my feet, or I'm not going to do things. It also looks like performing tasks inefficiently. Gossips. So gossiping actually involves untrue tales as well as true remarks about a person or their actions. And it can be focused on personal or professional traits. And it actually is a form of attack. Happens a lot when we're in conflict. Anger. Anger is such a big one when we are in conflict. I find a lot of the people that I work with and do individual coaching with, anger is a really big thing. So anger is about arguing, accusing, attacking, humiliating, and criticizing. And it's really interesting what I find with us with anger. Anger almost also becomes a capacity issue, right? We are all at maximum capacity right now, right? When we think about what is going on in the world and the state of the world, including the pandemic, we are all at capacity. And when we hit our capacity, what happens, right? We need one thing that is going to just tip us over the edge, and all of a sudden the gates open and it unleashes. And a lot of times it unleashes into anger, right? Because we just don't have the capacity to handle it anymore. And then finally, guilt, right? The guilt trippers, right? This is the emotional manipulation to actually control behavior. And this happens a lot from in conflict with people who are really emotional. So now that we've got the 5 most challenging personalities, right? We kind of walked through those. Does anyone have any questions or comments about how those show up in conflict? Okay. All right. I don't see anything in my chat box, so I'm going to move on. All right. So let's talk about now some automatic thoughts and how they show up. Okay. All right. Oh, thank you, Lauren, for putting the books back in there. I forgot to mention Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. He has an entire chapter on cultural considerations and cultural influences in his book Outliers. It's absolutely fascinating to see how cultural legacy really does impact how we show up in the world, especially in conflict. So that's why I included that book in the list. All right, so let's talk about our first automatic thought and where we go, especially if we have narcissistic tendencies, okay? And I got to tell you, as somebody who was coming from a controlling a space, right, because of my belief system, this was so me, right? I would get into a meeting, somebody would bring up I would start to talk about something and somebody would bring up an opinion and I immediately would get defensive, okay? So defensive and blaming is really common, right? We become defensive in the face of criticizing or we want to lay blame, right? Why do we do this? We do it because we want to divert attention away from our shortcomings, right? Again, this is all about judgment, right? We are judging ourselves for not being good enough. It is such a big human thing to think that we're not good enough, right? So what's the automatic thought that comes along with it, right? What's the thought? I don't want to admit my failure or my weaknesses, right? I was all about control. Admitting my failures and weaknesses was not okay with me because of my belief system. And I was not going to go there. So if you want to get curious about that, right? If you want to start looking at your belief system and saying, why does this happen to me, right? Ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? All right, so that's the first one. Second one, dismissing others' opinions, right? Treating other people's views as unimportant, right? This is when you get into a meeting and somebody says, I want everybody's opinions. You raise your hand and you put your thought out there and they go, yeah, no, we tried that 3 years ago. That didn't work. Somebody else chimes in. Yeah, no, that's not going to work because it's way too expensive, right? dismissing other people's opinions. And what happens over time? People stop raising their hands, right? It's not safe. It's not a safe space to explore, right? So why do we do it? It's a blocking strategy to win an argument. What's the thought behind it, right? There's really no other way to think about this. So if you want to get curious and look at your belief system, think, why am I feeling so insecure about this? What's going on the inside for me? Next one, this is tied to passive aggressive, right? Which is expressing feelings in subtle or direct ways, right? This is all about the need to express anger without engaging in conflict, right? This happens a lot in meetings when people are conflict averse, which happens to be one of the personality traits in the I. So I actually can really identify with this one too, right? Because I don't want to engage in conflict, but yet I don't exactly agree with what's going on. I want to make my point, but I don't want to look like the bad guy. So I will agree with everything in the meeting with what's being said, and I will look like I'm on board. And then when I get out of the meeting, I'm going to go to a confidant who's close to me and say, I don't agree with anything that we're doing. I'm not quite sure why we're doing this. And so I'm gonna kind of drag my feet on this project, right? That's what passive aggression looks like. So how do we get curious? How do we look at the belief system, right? Why am I afraid to express my anger and concern with clarity? What is it about it that's there for me? Gossiping and complaining. Talking about someone else's affairs or behavior, right? Gossiping and complaining is about power. I probably shouldn't say anything, but I want my feelings validated, right? I've seen this happen when you are, right, maybe in a meeting with a bunch of people, your stakeholders are there, and then you get out of the meeting, and again, you go to somebody who's like, no, oh, I'm back. Okay. I don't understand what they were talking about. They wouldn't stop talking. I don't understand why they were asking so many questions. Oh my gosh. Like, could we just move on with it? Right? Right. That's gossiping and complaining. Why do I feel the need to share about this experience? What's going on for me? Right? That ties back into the belief system. Arguing, this is the anger part, right? Exchanging different points of view in heated or tense ways. So challenging, right, is great, right? Because we know that in the quadrants, right, the 4 quadrants, the D, the dominant style, and the conscientious style will definitely challenge, right? So there is a fine line between challenging and arguing, right? And arguing happens, right, when you're not willing to back down and you're not willing to get it, right? So I call this, and this is going to be a cultural thing, a dog with a bone, right? These are the people that just won't let it go, right? That's when challenging turns into arguing. Why do we do it? We want to protect our ego. And if we get curious about our belief system, this is tied to empathy. Why is it so important for me to win? Next one is overpowering, right? Overwhelming others with superior force or guilt. We have a project that needs to get done. We're going to work all weekend to do it. I don't care what you've got going on. We're all going to be here. We're all going to do this. We're all going to be working on this, right? That's overpowering. Eliminates the possibility of a fair and even-handed discussion. This comes up a lot in conflict, especially when there are tight timelines going on, right? So the thought behind it is, I won't quit until I win. I don't care what it takes. Belief system, get curious. Why is it so important for me to keep people off balance? And then finally, we've got our last automatic thought, which is exaggeration, right? Representing something as being worse than it really is. Everybody in the office is overwhelmed. Everyone is hating their jobs right now, right? everybody is ready to quit, right? That's exaggerating. Why do we do it? This needs to sound as bad as it feels. The automatic thought, I need to get your attention. And if you want to get curious about it and think about your belief system, what am I looking to be validated? I will tell you, this was a huge one of mine. I was constantly exaggerating things when things felt bad for me. And as I looked at my belief system, I realized that my emotions were never validated when I was younger. It's just part of my family structure. And so that was why I had an exaggerating tendency when I was in conflict. And so once I knew that, then I was able to make the shift. So we are going to spend the last couple of minutes talking about the shift. All right. And then I want to leave a little bit of room for us to have questions, thoughts, that kind of stuff. All right. So now we're going to shift. We're going to talk about the shift, right? Okay. So now that we've explored it, we understand it, we've seen some examples, we know how all of this works, right? We know what goes on for us in conflict, right? How do we make the shift in our behaviors? How do we do that, right? Well, first is understanding resistance. Okay. Why is it as humans do we have resistance, right? Resistance comes from fears. It comes from our biases because we all have them. It's tied again back to our cultural, generational, and familiar things that we learned, and it comes from our belief system, right? So think about your resistance as your teacher. If you are feeling resistance on something, that means that you're trying to take action and you're not able to do it, or you are taking action in the world and you are not getting the result that you want. There is some resistance there for you, and that is your teacher. It is not a signal that something is wrong. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You do not need to be fixed. There's nothing wrong. It just means that something needs attention. And you get to decide what you want that attention to be. You get to decide what that looks like. Okay, that's what the shift is. All right, let's look at the second thing, right? So when we think about resistance, when we think about judgment, when we think about our belief system, right? Exploring and discovering and knowing about all of these things in our personalities, it brings them all out to the light, right? And when we bring them out to the light, what happens? They lose their power, right? As we start to understand what's going on and we can bring things to transparency and understand them, they lose their power. So remember, I said at the end of the last workshop, I was going to ask, how did the 24-hour judgment challenge go for you? What did you notice if you did it? What did you notice in the 24 hours when you were noticing your judgments, right? And if you want to take the 24-hour judgment challenge to the next level, the next thing to do now is to embrace stillness. So you notice your judgments, and instead of pushing them away and trying to do something to get them to be gone, embrace the stillness, embrace the feeling in your body so that you can start to tap into your belief system. So you can understand what's going on. Okay, that's part of the shift. Moving from judgment to neutrality, right? The way that you shift and move from judgment to neutrality is making the connection to the attachment that comes from your belief system. Okay, so we're going to go back to this, right? Something manifests in the external world. You got up late for work, right? In your backpack, that's your experience, right? You internalize it into your belief system, right? And now you want to make the connection to the attachment, right? What is it? What is the experience from your belief system that you are attached to that is making you feel judgmental, right? What is the emotion that is coming up for you? Are you feeling guilty for staying up late last night? Are you feeling shameful because your partner or spouse had to take care of everything this morning because you slept late, right? This is all part of what the attachment is to our belief system. And it is understanding that emotion that allows us to move from judgment into neutrality, which again allows us to open up our vulnerability, which opens up our trust, right? So this is part of the stillness. We embrace the uncomfortability, honor it, and thank it, right? And once we do that, then we can get curious, right? Help me understand, right? That's when we can start asking all of those questions and come at it from a very curious, right? This is when we really can embrace healthy debate and all of the things that healthy debate means. All right. So, the last thing we're going to talk about today is shifting and embracing the triad of transformation, right? I am a transformational coach. So what I help people do is I help people transform themselves, right? Tap into their potential, be able to create sustainable, positive change in your life that you do. I don't do it, you do it. And you do it by embracing and shifting, understanding everything we talked about, and then taking the knowledge that you've gained and the understanding that you have, being able to put it into practice, right? That's what all of these shifts are all about. So the last thing we're going to talk about today is the triad of transformation, okay? So what are some things that you can do to really embrace everything that we talked about today? And that is embracing the triad of transformation. So think about this as a continuum line, right? So you want to be able to go from resisting, right? Because we talked about resistance, and you want to be able to go over to allowing. You want to go from reacting, and you want to go over to responding. And you want to go from a place of controlling over to collaboration. Now, all of us as humans have a control mechanism, right? Because we are hardwired for survival and safety. And so control is part of the human experience. I happen to really have control in my life that I had to deal with. So, but every human has the resisting, the reacting, and the controlling as part of their hardwiring. All right. So we're going to look at these specific behaviors. Okay. So if you want to go from resisting to allowing, you're going to go from judgment to unconditional love. There's that love word again, right? Unconditional love. Go from shame and blame over to empathy. Go from self-protection over to vulnerability. Go from perfectionism over to experimentation, and go from failure over to learning. We look at reacting to responding. You're going to go from unplanned to very purposeful, right? You're going to be really purposeful about how you're going to respond. You're going to go from obscurity over to clarity. You're going to go from hasty, right? Doing things like off the cuff to thoughtfulness. You're going to put a lot of thought into how you want to respond. And from disregard over to consideration, taking everyone's thoughts and feelings into consideration, and going from compulsive over to intentional. And then the last one is going from shifting from controlling to collaboration. And what do the behaviors look like here, right? So going from a point of expertise over to curiosity. You're going from a place of force over to listening, a place of power over to nurturing, a place of convincing to holding space for people so that they feel safe and secure to explore, and going from being a knower over to being a learner. Okay, so that's what the triad of transformation looks like. Now, at the end of the presentation, I wanted to let you know that I did send Lauren a little worksheet for you all, just so that you would have a little practice in putting everything that we talked about together into play, because I know we went over a lot today. So Lauren has an exercise that is called choosing productive responses. And so she's got that to hand out to everyone. So she'll be sending that out at the end, maybe today or tomorrow, for you to do a little bit of practice on what we talked about today. Now, I want to, before I open it up for questions, there's one last thing. I always like to end my workshops with a quote. And I absolutely love this quote, and I love this picture, because I look at this picture as being healthy debate, right? Because when we as humans are in conflict, we are looking at things very with blinders on, right? We're looking at things very myopically, right? We've put ourselves in a box. And so we're not able to look at the larger picture, right? So I love this quote. It says, in conflict, being willing to change allows you to move from a point of view to view a point, a higher, more expansive place from which you can see both sides. And that is a quote from Thomas Crum. And Thomas is an author, an educator. He is a mind-body expert, and he is a fellow coach. So think about that when you think about healthy debate, because that's exactly what healthy debate is, right? You're coming from a more expansive place, and you're opening yourself up to opportunities and possibilities. So, all right, let's see, where are we at? Oh, it's 10:52. So I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen because I want to be able to see everybody's lovely faces if I can see you. And I would love to hear your thoughts, your questions. Just really, let's open it up for just a little bit of a discussion about how this experience was for you today, and maybe some of the things that you were able to take away from today. So I would love to hear from folks.
Hello.
Hello, Alicia. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I am very good.
I just wanted to say thank you for providing this opportunity for us to learn more about ourselves, really. And what I really took from this conversation today is that whenever you're in different roles, you have a different style, but you can implement, there's something in every style that you can implement, in your role. So you're not just one particular, but you do have that core, but I really appreciate that, and just learning how to kind of maneuver in the right situations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Alicia. Yeah, it's so important that, some people always say to me, oh, why do you put people in categories, right? Why do I need to know my category? I don't want to be put in a box, right? And that is so true, right? We certainly don't want to be put into a box, but sometimes knowing your category helps you get out of your category, right? It helps you to see, this is where I find myself, right? This is my go-to, especially in conflict. Now that I understand it, now I can stretch out of that category, because that's what you want to do, right? You want to be able to stretch yourself. Absolutely. Yeah, TJ.
I love what Alicia just said, because I think that's something that really resonates with me, because in an organization where you carry multiple roles that require different skills, that especially when they're the exact opposites and you have to like force yourself into the other role to be successful in it, I think that is definitely challenging. But seeing it in a graphic, that really helps you know it, just turn the volume up or down.
Yeah, so I wanted to comment, Akriti, I'll get to you in just a sec. Akriti, sorry. I want to talk about force a little bit, right? This is that book, Power versus Force, right? Because when you think about forcing yourself to do something, right, that takes a lot of energy. You are using a lot of energy to force yourself to do it, which means sustaining that is going to be very difficult. So understanding why it's happening, right, allows you to not force yourself to do it. It allows you to make the shift. And now you're using the power of yourself, the power of your potential, the power of the universe. Right? Yeah. So that was really, thank you for that, TJ. That's awesome. Okay, Akriti.
Gary, thank you so much for your time today. And it was wonderful to listen to you and get a lot out of your talks, a lot to process. I think these are always like really heavy takeaways that we get from your talks. I think for me today, what I took away, in addition to what Alicia and TJ were talking about, was the fact that again, the question about internalizing your external data is being conscious, that I think, again, when you talked about that, that internalizing gap, what's out there, how you internalize it. I think being more conscious and more proactive about those internalization process, I think is something that moving forward, hopefully I'll try to incorporate in my in my life.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for mentioning that. So, I always say to my clients, the goal here is that it's not that you don't want conflict in your life. You need it. It's very important for us to have conflict. It's how we come at the best opportunities, the best results, right? So I kind of look at it on the energetic scale, right? So understanding and learning all this, as you are going out into the external world, right? You start with your energies vibing really high, right? Your energy is up here. Then something happens in the external world and it brings your energy down here, right? And so a lot of us spend a lot of time down here, right? Spend a lot of time down here. And being able to build awareness and build the muscles allow you to just bounce back faster, right? So think about it's a bounce back ability factor, right? Things will always happen in your life. Conflict will always be there. But when you come down, when you understand it and you can build the skill, you can bounce back faster.
Just to add to what you said, Carrie, I think that also makes you a more empathetic person. When you're trying to put yourself in somebody else's position, or trying to understand or internalize why somebody's acting the way they are. I think that's very important to understand when you're working in a team setting, or just in your normal personal life as well.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes. So here's the secret. Okay, I'm going to give you a little secret today. Your ability to love yourself unconditionally, right, has the direct reflect and impact on how you can love and be unconditional with other people. It is almost impossible to love someone else unconditionally when you are not able to love yourself unconditionally. And so that's why when when I do my workshops, it all starts with you. It has to, right? Because to be a better leader, to be a better human, right? It starts with you because it's your capacity, right? It starts with the capacity of you and then moves outward. So that is a really excellent. So thank you for bringing that up, Akriti. Thank you.
I would just add, sort of jumping off of what Akriti shared, was sort of like perception is reality, in terms of, what you were saying when we're looking at the DISC assessment, and how you might say something to somebody and mean it without offense or matter of factly, or in whatever manner you are conveying that, and they could be receiving that in a completely different manner. And I think that is, something really important when we're building interpersonal relationships inside and outside of the workplace, and building rapport with others, is understanding how people are receiving what you're saying. And if you put a little more time or care into how you're conveying your message, it might go a lot further to build trust.
Yes. Thank you for saying that, Sabrina. Yeah, that's exactly it. That is exactly it. It's right, putting yourself in other people's shoes, right? That's empathy. And it's really important as a leader. And understanding is, building awareness and understanding it is the first step. So thank you. Yeah. All right, Lauren, I want to be really mindful of the time. It's 11:01, my time anyway. In Wisconsin, it's 11:01, 12:01 your time. All right, our next workshop in 2 weeks is on work of leaders. So these things are kind of view of like building off of themselves, right? So we're really going to sort of dive into to say like what are the work of leaders and what does it look like and what are the things that you need to be pay attention to as a leader. Okay. So Lauren, I'm going to let you finish it up.
Thanks so much, Carrie. I'm actually going to turn it over to Erasmo to close this out.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Carrie, again, for such an insightful session. And thank you so much for joining us today. We will be sending out a copy of the slides for session 3 in English and Spanish, and a link to the recorded version of today's sessions via email. And as Carrie mentioned, we will see you all on April 7 at 10 a.m. Eastern Time for our third and final session of the Global Leaders webinar series. Thanks again and have a great rest of the week.